Shades of a Blue Orphanage, 9 tracks for 41 minutes, the second studio album released in March 1972 via Decca. Produced by Nick Tauber, the title of the album is a combination of the band members' previous bands before this one, Shades of Blue and Orphanage, and the track Sarah on this album was written for Phil's grandmother. Again, all songs bar one were written by Phil, and with only one track being co-written by them all. The lineup was Phil, Eric Bell, and Brian Downey, with additional instrumentation from Clodagh Simmons. I'm going to try and pronounce it that way. But anyway, Dave.
So they appear to have found what direction they want to go in, but unfortunately it's the wrong direction. They're leaning more towards the more mellow side that they showcased on the first album, but it just lacks the prog elements in my mind that made the first one interesting. It does contain one of Phil's first most personal songs about his grandmother, as Andrew's already mentioned, and not to be confused with the Sarah about his daughter, which is much better.
Yeah, and much later.
Yeah, a lot of life lived in between. I don't want to forget How to Jive, most unusual Thin Lizzy song I think they ever did, and Phil's doing his best Elvis impersonation I reckon on this.
That was weird. That was so Tall Bar Blues.
Very standout-ish on the album, possibly the most interesting song on this. Overall, the album doesn't pick up pace until about track 6 with Babyface, and when they are rocking, this is what they like to do. I don't know why they didn't do more songs like this on this album, because they're obviously good at it, and with the performance, they're obviously enjoying it. It's not terrible by any means, but it's not really groundbreaking, and probably, we've discussed this in the chat behind the scenes, but if a band released this as a second album these days, they wouldn't be releasing a third album.
No.
So, 5 out of 10 stand out to be Sarah, Brought Down, and Babyface.
Mellow, soulful, bluesy, and slightly funky. I regret my decision to review these albums backwards, by the way. I never listened to this one before either, and again, I thought the production was shithouse, but again, I'm going to let them get away with it because it's their second album in 1972. Like, they were releasing albums almost every year.
Which was great, It was only later on that it started to spread out.
Throughout the album, there are again hints of later Thin Lizzy, the style we're all familiar with. And I reckon this album does its job as far as showing a band, and it's still very early stages before finding their signature sound. I gave it a 6 out of 10 standouts for Buffalo Gal and Babyface.
Drum solo to end the first track. I loved that. Very rarely done. Very rarely done. No one does it now. I haven't heard.
Probably not want to do it again either.
Maybe a Degent band. Degent.
How did you bring that up in this episode? Seriously.
I don't really understand this album at all. All over the shop.
Don't understand you much today at the moment either.
No real cohesion or direction on this album, I didn't think. Phil Lynott and his storytelling, it's great, but even he sounds a bit unsure of where he was going. There's a very big mix of musical styles. There's some Elvis, there's funk, there's jazz, there's weird stuff, but it doesn't gel. I think 1972 there's probably still a lot of experimental music being made, but when you listen to it like 44 years later, it doesn't do it. It's not very good, folks. I gave it a 4 out of 10.
Wow.
I did have a song though called Babyface.
Yeah, that's the rocking.
I think that's going to be pretty universal, that choice.
Yes.
Just on a short note, Dennis, at least if you reviewed them backwards, it went worse for you, but in the review process, it'll get better for you as we go along.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, I found the opening track to be almost like a groovy zapper kind of a number. I really wasn't sure of it as an album opener. I would have thought it'd be better at the end of the album, not at the beginning, in my opinion. Interesting production. It's boomy, too much bottom end. They're still working it all out, including the production on this. It doesn't quite work. The guitar tone is almost buried, which I didn't like. Some of the studio tricks employed as well feel intrusive, particularly on tracks like Buffalo Girl and I Don't Want to Forget How to Jive. They're jarring. It's just too much. It's too over the top. I reckon the songs would work live, which we'll find out later on in Live and Dangerous, but the production, those tricks are too over the top for this album overall. Lyrically, it's also not as strong as the debut. Sarah is a beautiful song, but the mix hurt it, in my opinion.
For sure.
The vocals are hard to make out, but the double tracking shows that Phil was on point with them. He was a very good vocalist. But this album overall feels like it was recorded with really bad microphone placement. It just feels way out of whack. Brought Down, though, there's a track in here called Brought Down. It overcomes all of those problems and is a really, really strong track. The there's potential on this record, but it's missed. Babyface is the most complete track on the album. It's a solid song, probably the most straight up rock song the band has done as well up to this point.
Up to this point, yeah.
Yep. Those two tracks save the album, in my opinion. Musically, they can all perform and do it really well, so they're solid there. Lyrically, it gets stronger as it goes along, more storytelling and well-rounded lyrics. Chatting today in particular has some really good lyric writing. You can see how diverse the range of the band will be throughout and has been up to this point, and I think it benefits them as the story goes on. At this point, though, they're a bit lost. Second album, Blues, did hit it. Diverse and solid album, but the production did bury it. 6 out of 10 I picked Brought Down and Babyface, and we'll give you a taste.